Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we're looking at a knife from Kubey, and this is the model KU074. Now this came to me from a subscriber, JD. He sent me 3 knives. You may have seen my little channel update kind of mailbag video. He sent me 3 knives to review and I'm very, very grateful for that. So thank you again, JD, for that. And Kubey is a brand that I did not have a ton of experience with. The only knife that I own from Kubey is the Kubey Eris, which has been previously reviewed. I have 2 of these actually. And this is kind of more in their mid-range, I guess. These are around $50, $60, somewhere in there. This guy is very, very budget friendly and a model that I was not familiar with and have actually really enjoyed, more so than I thought that I would. So we're basically looking at G10 handle scales, D2 blade steel. It's a flipper design and it goes for $20, $19.99 on Amazon.com, which is crazy, crazy cheap. I mean, really, I think the value with this thing is pretty out of bounds at $19.99. So just kind of as I'm talking, just remember this is a $20 knife. So overall length here is 8 inches, and the weight on this guy is a hefty 5 ounces. So let's do a few size comparisons using the standard comparisons. We got a Ontario Rat Model 1, lined up pivot to pivot. So it's going to be a little shorter than the Rat 1 and a little longer than the Rat 2. So it kind of lands in between the two as far as overall length. Obviously the Kubey has a nice broad blade, so it's going to be a little more of a pocket hog in terms of the amount of space that it takes up. But there's a couple size comparisons, and we'll do 2 more with the Paramilitary 2 and the Benchmade Mini Griptilian. Again, kind of lands between the two in terms of overall length. Not too dissimilar in size to the PM2 in terms of overall length and just overall space it takes up in the pocket, but quite a bit heavier. So there's our size comparisons. The blade on this guy is 3.5 inches. It is a satin finish, and it's a really nice satin finish, actually. It's kind of got this reverse tanto drop point sheep's foot. I was doing some research, as I always do, and I've seen it called so many different things. And it's funny, you know, nowadays with just the different geometry that people use in the profile and silhouette of their knives, sometimes it's really hard to kind of call it something. So this reminds me of a reverse tanto, right? Something like a Benchmade 940. Technically, the blade is dropping towards the tip, so you could call it a drop point. If it was a little more rounded and not quite so reverse tanto, I might call it a sheep's foot, but whatever, call it what you want. That's what it looks like as far as the blade shape is concerned. The grind is a full flat grind, and it has a full length swedge across the top here on both sides, which is really nice looking, and really well done as far as the grind overall. It's very consistent and even. And JD, I'll clean this up. I use this thing quite a bit and got some gunk on there, so I'll make sure to clean it up before I send it back. But that's what we're looking at as far as the blade is concerned. And again, that is in D2 steel. It also does have a forward finger choil, which we'll talk about a little later when we get into ergonomics. So the blade length, I think I mentioned this already. If not, it's 3.5 inches. So that's your blade length there. And as far as actual cutting edge, we're looking at 1, 2, 3 inches on the dot. Your other half inch is going to be that finger choil that's obviously not a usable cutting edge. The handle is 4.6 inches in length, and it's going to be made from a smooth G10, and it's definitely got some milling and some texturing going on, which is quite attractive, actually. I was surprised how much I liked the look of this once I kind of got it in hand and started using it. So that's the handle material. There is the G10, and it is pretty smooth. Not a ton of texture going on, but it is very nice to look at. It's just not super grippy. But when we get into ergonomics, we'll talk more about just the overall feel in hand. And so the smoothness is not a huge issue for me. Inside of the handle, we have stainless steel liners, and they are nested. So they're nested into the G10, and they are not skeletonized or milled out to reduce weight in any way. and it's a $20 knife, right? So I don't necessarily expect them to take that extra step to do that. And that's one of the reasons why this comes in at right about 5 ounces. The handle color, it does come in a few different colors. It comes in black, tan, orange, and green. This obviously being the green. So you do have a few options for color based on your personal taste and preference. And I will say the black and the orange both look pretty sweet to me. Not crazy on tan, but they all look pretty good. So let's talk about the action. It is a flipper, as I mentioned. So there's your flipper tab there. No thumb studs, just a flipper. And it runs on ball bearings, ball bearing washers. And I'm pretty certain, I did not disassemble this one, but I'm pretty certain that they are stainless steel ball bearings and they're not ceramic. I would assume that at this price point, but they are ball bearings, and it is very, very smooth. Very smooth to open and very, very smooth to close. So really, really great action on this guy. The D10 is good. It's probably a 7 out of 10, which is kind of my preference. So as you see me put pressure on the flipper, you can kind of see my finger kind of changing colors a little bit. You can kind of see that blade, went a little too far there. You can kind of see the blade wanting to kind of rock out of the handle, but that D10 is holding it back just enough. But once you surpass that, it does fly out pretty nicely, having some mass to that blade. So I do like the smoothness overall with those bearings, and the D10 is kind of right in my wheelhouse. As far as lockup and centering is concerned, it is a liner lock, and it's a very thick liner as far as the actual dimension of the liner lock itself. And it locks up pretty early, probably 25%, I would say, which is good. I prefer a liner lock to lock up early. Same thing with a frame lock. It's quite strong, quite strong. You've got a little stop pin right back there. Very, very strong. No blade play, up, down, left, right. If I, again, really try, I could probably make it go side to side, but a very strong and sturdy lockup on this guy. Very, very beefy. The centering is just a hair off to the right, and I think that's probably in part due to this liner being very thick and pretty damn strong. And there's no skeletonization on this liner, so there's just a lot of pressure being exerted in that direction on the blade, so it's just a hair off to the right. It's not terrible. It doesn't affect the function, and again, this goes for $19.99, so I'm not too concerned there. As far as texturing, jimping, backspacer, things like that, we'll jump into that next. So it does have a backspacer, and it is made from G10. A little bit of texturing on it, and just kind of towards the butt end of the blade. So kind of a partial flow-through design there. No problems with that. I don't particularly care, personally, whether a knife is a total flow-through, full backspacer, partial backspacer. I frankly don't really care. So this is just fine by me. It does have jimping on, well, I shouldn't call it jimping, but it does have texture on the backspacer. It does have jimping on the spine of the blade. It has some texturing on the liner itself, which we talked about. And it also has some jimping on the flipper tab itself. And the jimping is moderately functional. It's kind of on the smoother side, but being a beefy, kind of heavy knife, I don't know that I need anything necessarily more aggressive than that, based on the shape, and we'll talk a little more about ergonomics here in a second, but the jimping is moderately functional. It's not overly functional. I'd like it to be a little bit more aggressive personally, but that's all taste, right? Some people like crazy sharp jimping. Other people just don't like jimping, period. So just be aware that it is moderately functional and a little bit on the smooth side. The pocket clip on this guy is going to be tip up right side only. So only one carry option. So if you're a lefty, you're kind of out of luck with this guy. It's not a deep ride clip, and it actually rides pretty high. So you're going to have actually close to an inch protruding from the pocket. So that's what you're looking at coming out of the pocket. So not my favorite pocket clip design at all, really. It's nice and thick in that it'll accommodate thick material, but it does protrude quite a bit. So not my favorite pocket clip. I think they could have done a much better job on the pocket clip. It functions just fine. The retention's good. Didn't have any problems getting it in and out of the pocket. Just not my favorite design personally. The ergonomics on this thing are excellent for EDC. And I say that because they're not excellent for some other more specific tasks. So when I was using this to slice apples and open mail, this thing is a hell of a letter opener. You wouldn't necessarily think it being a kind of a thicker, broader blade, but just with the geometry of the tip, it just, I don't know. I was opening letters like, it was very enjoyable to open letters with this thing. So for EDC tasks, it's quite comfortable. Your hand just kind of melts into the contours. Your thumb lands on the thumb ramp. You've got a nice, very usable forward finger choil, which I very much appreciate having bigger hands. I can get my big kind of meaty forefinger and really squeeze into that choil and have no concern that I'm going to cut myself. So I do like a very functional forward finger choil. Really the only major complaint I have with this knife that I think is more of an objective complaint is that when I'm doing something that's a little more, a little harder use than basic EDC tasks, which again for me is typically going to be doing things like breaking down cardboard for recycling. When I put this thing in a hammer grip and squeeze down with all my might, I get a crazy intense, very painful hot spot from the pocket clip, and you'll be able to see that hot spot kind of right there across the middle of my palm where that pocket clip kind of dug in. And I'll do that again and see if I can get you to get a little better view on that, but it hurts like pretty bad, where it's just digging in kind of that line right there. So for hard use, where you need to get a hammer grip and really go to town, that pocket clip is extraordinarily painful actually. So for me, this would just be kind of an EDC knife, a bigger, heavier one, but for hard use, and I think it could stand up to it. I mean, it's got a nice thick blade stock. It does taper, but you know, strong lockup, you know, all that stuff, a nice forward choil. You could really put this thing to work, but that pocket clip just kills my palm. You can see the indentations from it there. So wasn't too stoked on that. So that's my one kind of major complaint about this knife. Everything else is kind of subjective, personal preference type stuff. But overall, I was actually quite pleased with the quality, the fit and finish at 20 bucks. It's nice. I mean, it really is. And I didn't think I'd like the blade shape as much as I do. But again, if you're looking for a budget-friendly folder to add to your collection, and you like knives on the kind of beefier side, for $19.99, you know, I don't necessarily think you can go wrong with this. So that is the Kubey model KU074. Thank you again, JD, for loaning it to me. And again, I'll clean it up for you and lube it up before I send it back. But yeah, a good experience for me for my second Kubey knife to handle. So those are my general thoughts. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I certainly do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.